A Nova Scotia artist has published a book of portraits in tribute to the Queen in time for her Platinum Jubilee year and in time for her birthday, which is today. The book is called Duty, a love letter to Queen Elizabeth II from the perspective of an LGBT Canadian artist. Owen Grant Innes grew up in Halifax. He has all kinds of Cape Breton connections, and we reached him today. Hello, Owen. Welcome to Main Street.
Thank you, Wendy. Very happy to join you today.
How did you come to publish a book about the Queen?
Well, very good question. It was the beginning of lockdown. I was tucked away in my painting studio in rural France, and I was in between sort of projects, and I was also at the same time applying for British citizenship, so nationality and the sense of Queen and country was very much in the forefront of my mind. So I started to work and just experiment, and I did a few paintings, and my style sort of evolved into a portrait style that I was, happy to work with for a while. And I did this group of paintings of the Queen, and I thought, okay, here we are, the beginning of a pandemic. I'm not sure how I'm going to communicate these images with the world. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a book because it's sort of a perfect project that I could do and manage in a lockdown situation.
So you had key moments in the Queen's life. What moments did you pick?
Well, I picked moments from her entire life and from her birth right through to present day. And there are certain moments that were very easy to pick because they were poignant in my mind. And even though some of them happened before I was born, like her coronation and her 21st birthday address, where she promised to dedicate her life to her duty, whether her life be long or short. And then, things that happened during my life, like, the death of Diana and the loss of Prince Philip. And, even when she went to Germany in 1965, it was such an iconic image for me. That's the one I put on the cover. Then I went and I realized I'm making a book. I had to sort of stitch them together as a story. So I took the paintings that I had that came to my mind, and I did research and sort of filled in the gaps in the story, and then it just became a visual biography of Her Majesty's reign.
Well, I'm going to get into that in a moment, but I want to ask about the color palette that you used, because that has echoes of your upbringing in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Maud Lewis and Joe Norris and folk artists. My dad was a bit of a very folk artist kind of painter. So I grew up with that sort of inspiration and tremendous respect for these people because they didn't very often have a formal kind of, masters in painting. They came to it from a pure love of creating, and that is something that's really inspirational to me. So I've sort of carried that my whole life, that love of color that I learned as a child in Nova Scotia through all my work. And certainly the Queen is a perfect subject for me because she's someone who uses color in her wardrobe intentionally so that she stands out, so that when there's, throngs of people coming to see her, that she's easily spotted in the crowd. So it was a perfect marriage, this little group of paintings from me, her colorful outfits and my colorful palette. Great.
When you saw the Queen the first time, what can you remember about that?
Well, it was in Halifax. I grew up in Halifax, and I can remember it was a very foggy day, like many days in Halifax, and I was there with my mom. We went downtown, and we were standing in the crowd, not very far away, but, maybe perhaps 50 meters away, and she was, planting a tree, I think, at the Camp Hill Veterans Memorial. There was a new wing being built. I remember her just standing there with the silver shovel in her mint green outfit and her white hat and just sort of shimmering. And it was just a lovely experience to be that close to someone who had become very familiar in my mind.
Can you tell me the imprint it made on you?
Well, I think that for me, the Queen really imprinted herself on me when I was 5 years old and I went to primary school and began to attend primary school. And we would sing God Save the Queen every morning, and we'd stand beside our desks and face the blackboards at the front of the class where there was a loudspeaker that played the music, which led us in song. And there was always a portrait of Her Majesty above the loudspeaker, sort of a beautiful, regal black and white photograph. So this, every morning early school years, we would sing, day after day, month after month. And I sort of made a connection with this woman, and she slowly or maybe quickly worked her way into my heart and sort of connected me to a broader world. She was the Queen of Canada, but she was also the British Queen and Queen of many countries and the head of the Commonwealth. So I realized that this woman is a unifier, and I say in the book that I was a young boy who preferred pink to blue, so I felt a certain amount of isolation, not knowing where I fit in the world, because as a young gay child, it wasn't always easy to understand how to be in the world. And the Queen, I think, was a symbol for me of a connection to a bigger, vaster world of history and things that were so foreign to me as a tiny child in Nova Scotia.
I want to talk a little bit more about that sense of isolation and what you saw in Queen Elizabeth.
As a child, as I said, there was a sense of feeling of belonging to something bigger. So that gave me a sense of belonging, and certainly as history has unfolded over the last 70 years, the Queen has been there to sign royal assents, here in the UK, and also, the Governor General would sign in Canada. So, the monarchy for us is attached to the decriminalization of homosexuality in the late 60s, and then fast forward to 2005, I think, in Canada, when the Marriage Equality Act came in, and it was again by royal assent. So, in a way, as a head of state, the Queen doesn't always orchestrate these changes, but she walks through them with us and represents them for us. And also, as sort of someone who represents the most traditional of British values, and also as the head of the church here in England, for her to publicly address in her speeches to say that she demands of her government, equality and to fight against discriminations on the basis of sexual orientation, it's a very, very powerful thing, because, people that, they use traditional values and religion as pillars to support discrimination and homophobia. So when the very woman who is the head of those organizations says, no, stop, there's room in our world for all of her citizens, gay and lesbians included, all LGBTQ citizens are welcome and part of the fabric of these nations. So that is a very, very powerful thing.
We were talking about the image that she sets forward, and there is, as you've said, the Queen as an individual has been very courageous in issues of social justice. The very odd time that she makes a very public statement, it is often on the side of the angels, and it to me it always speaks to her character, and I'm wondering just how. When you hear her, if you hear her character or her sense of duty, or what is that we're hearing?
Well, I think we hear a voice of a person who's from the greatest generation. The Queen served in the army in the Second World War. She was a mechanic. She was a teenager, so she served as a mechanic. And she was part of that generation that really fought so much and gave so much that we came out of the Second World War victorious and free and democratic peoples. And I think she understands how fragile all those things are. And it's those people really that laid the foundation for the decades of human rights that have flourished since then. If we look back at women's rights, gay rights, people with disabilities, there's been so many positive changes in legislation and, quality of life for people who might have suffered stigmatization in years past. And I think that largely comes from a sense of duty, which the Queen has, and I think her formative years were in that war, and she understands that sacrifice and freedom is hard to win, and so we must cherish it. And I think that's very much always her message. For me, she's a unifying force. she indicates in so many of her speeches that we are stronger together than we are apart. Like you said, she can't really voice a strong political opinion. Her role is to be a figurehead and not be involved in these things. But she symbolically in Canada supports our Aboriginal people. She was very much in friendship with Nelson Mandela around apartheid. And, you know, as I've said earlier, that she has supported my people, gay and lesbians, which is very brave at times in very conservative circles.
I hear a little catch in your voice because today is her 96th birthday.
It is.
And we are all thinking about her, and I think thinking a little bit about the greatest generation. Those of us who remember them and knew the building they did. When we talk about the Queen symbolically, we're also talking about, in my mind anyway, we are talking about that generation and the fact that we are losing them. And there is something very painful about that. Yeah, no, and very much. And, you know, I think, she's been, I was born in 1962. She's been my queen my whole life. But she was also the queen of my grandparents and the queen of my parents, and she's the queen of my nieces and nephews. And I think, as you say, she does connect us to generations past and even generations future. And there is a sadness that, you know, with time we gain things, but there's a loss. And I think the further away we get from those heroes, you know, the mists of time sort of cloud their memory, and I think you're very right. They're important. It's important to remember our history. I think it was Churchill that said, the further we can look back in history, the further we can see our future. And that's very much, I'm paraphrasing him, but she does remind us that it is important to understand our history. Well, thank you, Owen, for this book and these thoughts, and I wish you all the best. Thank you, Wendy. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And that's Owen Grant Innes, the artist behind Duty, a love letter to Queen Elizabeth II. And that is available at Amazon.ca. And this is Main Street, CBC Radio 1 in Cape Breton. The time is 4:30.